Lance Armstrong, Barry Bonds, and Anderson Silva. One of the top world-class athletes that are in our generation today. They do have one thing in common, though. Like I said, world-class athletes, but a lot of people consider them cheaters. Why do I say that? Because these athletes have been tested positive for PEDs, performance enhancement drugs. Why did they do it? Did they do it because of the fame? Did they do it because of the money? Or did they just have that drive to be the best in their sport, in their individual sports? We can't really answer that question. The only thing we know is that they did do the performance enhancement drugs, and we have our opinions. Now, let me give you a back brief real quick. The world has there's an agency called the World Anti-Doping Agency where they test these athletes in different areas of sports to make sure that they don't take these drugs. Now, this agency is hired by many professional sports. For example, the UFC does have the agency as their substance abuse, I'm going to say counselors. They do submit their drug testing program to them, and they confirm whether they come out negative or they test positive for some sort of drug. They do have different rules for different areas. In Australia, they don't really test for certain types of PEDs. So if these UFC fighters or boxers were to go to Australia and conduct a fight and compete, most of the time, a lot of them, if they were tested, they would come out positive for any type of PEDs. So with that being said, the UFC is one of my favorite sports, and it's an individual sport. Now, it's completely different from team sports and individual sports. In a team sport, you need everybody, basically like football, baseball, and soccer. Those are just examples of team sports. Now, there are athletes that do use them in those team sports, but they use them for different reasons. And these different reasons are to set stats or statistics in home runs, like I mentioned earlier, Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds has been positive for PEDs, and he has one of the highest home run records. Mark McGwire, another one to say. Now, there are football players that use them, but don't really get caught enough because they don't really set a tone because, once again, it's a team sport. Now, UFC, an individual sport, where a person could be using these PEDs to where they can fight longer or become stronger or maybe even knock somebody out a lot quicker because they use these performance enhancement drugs. Now, for a recent example, Anderson Silva just fought in UFC 183 against Nick Diaz. Anderson Silva got tested before his competition, about a month before his competition, which is considered an out-of-competition testing. And after the fight was over, he did test positive for distillalone metabolites. Distillalone metabolites basically is when a person is cutting weight, this steroid helps you maintain the muscle instead of cutting down muscle when you're losing the weight. So let's just say I was going to get in a UFC fight and I weigh 195 and my weight class was 160. So with this steroid or drug that I would be using, I could cut down about 30 pounds in about a month, but still keep my muscle tone and strengthen my muscle, and I wouldn't be weak or lose any of my strength. A lot of these UFC fighters go from being a high weight to a lower weight, but they lose a lot of energy. So when they do the weigh-ins the night before, they end up getting their strength back because as soon as their weigh-in is done, they go and have a healthy meal and gain about 30 pounds in one night. So with that being said, they don't lose much strength. So that's one example of this UFC fighter using this. Now, Dana White, the CEO of UFC, has been cracking down on this anti-doping. He did mention that before they used to randomize when they would test these people with the anti-doping. Now, how he used to do it is main events would be the ones that would use the anti-doping testing. They would test their main event cards, basically the 2 main events, and if it was a title fight. Now he's doing it for the whole card. So everybody from the preliminaries all the way to the very, very top, he's testing every single one. Now, my opinion on that is it's great, except their testings don't come in, or the test results don't come in till after they give their fight and the results of the fight. So after the fight is done, now one person wins and he's been tested positive, and the other person loses, then there's really a mix-up there. They just suspend the one that won, but the one that lost doesn't get anything in return other than another fight. So another way that these fighters are using these drugs, they use these drugs for numbness. Basically, the same fight I was talking about, Anderson Silva and Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz tested positive for marijuana. Now, tested positive for marijuana because they basically try to numb themselves before the fight so that they don't feel anything during the fight. For example, there was a fight back in 2002 where a fighter used methamphetamines or meth to basically numb himself and gain strength before the fight, and throughout the whole fight he didn't feel anything, and he ended up knocking the other person out. He was suspended, and they did give him a fine. So think about how before the randomizing of this, they didn't test everybody, but now that they started testing everybody, they're going to start catching a lot more people, or at least in my opinion. And before, there was a lot of fighters that would fight without even being tested, so they're going to have a lot of conflict with the positive testing that comes out of this. So like I mentioned before, substance abuse program in the UFC was not where it needs to be today. So Dana White, the CEO, is working on it, and he will surely come out, I believe, with cleaner fight. We're leveling the playing field and giving everybody an equal amount of chance to win a bout and make it to the championship. There's my presentation on the substance abuse programs and about the UFC substance abuse. Thank you for your undivided attention.